What is the creepiest thing that has ever happened to you? 1. A few years back, I woke up in the middle of the night. We had a 2-month newborn sleeping in the room next door. I had a video monitor on my bedside table so that my wife and I could easily check on him. So, I clicked the button that turns on the video image, and what I saw scared me like nothing ever before. My baby boy was gone. Now, I know that instinct should have made me run right into the baby's room. Instead, I froze. I looked over, and my wife was sleeping next to me. Finally, I moved. But not to run into the other room, like I should have done. Instead, I turned up the volume on the baby monitor. I heard another woman's voice singing a lullaby. I'm not kidding. Another woman was singing to my baby in a very soft, gentle, and melodic voice. I don't remember what song it was, something like, "Go to sleep, baby." Finally, my freeze broke. I jumped up, ran through the hallway, and burst into my boy's room. He was sound asleep in his crib. No woman. No singing. Turns out, the monitor was picking up my next-door neighbor's monitor. They had just bought the video monitor for their own newborn, on our recommendation. Nothing supernatural here, but I don't know if I've ever experienced something scarier. 2, 10 years old. Men's locker room at the Y. An old dude touched my dick and smiled. It was over in 1 second and haunts me 42 years later. 3. I've posted this story before, but I think it fits here so I copied and pasted it. I used to have a crap job at a casino that got me working some pretty weird hours. Some days I would work a normal 9 to 5, others I would go in at 6 p.m. and not leave until 2 or 3 a.m. Not a big deal, except by that time in the morning, all the parking spaces around my apartment building would be taken, so I had to park a few blocks away and walk to get to my building. I would park, get my pepper spray and keys in hand, lock my car, and walk the block or two to my building. I never felt like was in any way unsafe until one night when I found a parking space across the street from my building that happened to be in front of a bar. I pulled into the space and got my keys ready. I noticed a guy smoking in the doorway of the bar, about 5 cars down, but he was looking in the other direction and didn't seem to care that I was there. I got out of the car and was about halfway across the street before he noticed I was a girl, and I heard him yell, "Hi, sweetie." I ignored him, and that must have pissed him off, because he yelled, "Which?" I started sprinting to my building when I heard the sound of him running up behind me. The building I lived in at the time had been built a long time ago, and everything was outdated, including the security system. After 10 p.m. the doors would lock automatically, and you would have to put a key in the lock and turn it for the doors to open, and it would take forever. I finally got the door opened and had just shut it before he got there and was yanking on the handle and screaming at me. My skin was crawling for a few days after that. 4. Walking home from 7 to 11 in San Diego, guy parks across the street and starts walking behind me asking me incoherent questions. I apologize, I'm new here, keep walking. The guy slaps beer out of my hands, puts one arm under my right armpit, uses the right boob as a kind of handle, and the other between my legs and gropes the lady zone, and starts dragging me into bushes. I'm awkward and shocked, so I start forcefully scolding him, "Sir, no, no, sir, no." Not loudly enough until I realize he's successfully kidnapping me and likely for nefarious purposes. I yell louder, "No." Thankfully an off-duty cop was jogging and came running at the guy who dropped me, grabbed my purse, ran, then dropped it and kept running. They found him a few months later, I testified, and he went to federal prison. I think he's out as of last year. 5. When I was in my early 20s, I was fresh out of the closet and lived in the French Quarter. I started getting hang-up calls from someone, presumably a hookup. After a few months of sporadic calls, someone showed up outside of my window at around 2 a.m. and started blasting a tape recording of me saying, "Hello. Hello," and then drove off. 6. When I was a teen, I saw a faceless entity in my house one night who was trying to steal my face. 7 years later I was staying at my friend's house, and the first night I was there he said he had a crazy nightmare that some faceless guy was stealing my face, and I never told him about it before. 7. I had sleep paralysis a few days ago. I had both visual and auditory hallucinations. I saw a shadow person sitting right on my chest and talking to me in a very inhuman low-pitched voice, and I couldn't get a single word. The whole experience lasted about 20 seconds, but I couldn't sleep for the rest of the night. 8. Staying at a small lodge, about 10 rooms. We had the whole place rented to ourselves, and there were maybe 15 of us there. No kids allowed. Woke up in the middle of the night because I heard kids running up and down the hall. Looked out there and nothing. Chalked it up to my imagination. The next morning got up and casually mentioned over breakfast, and 3 other people had heard it too. Then a staff member overheard us talking and told us that the lodge was built where a house had formerly been built but had burned down many years ago, like in the 40s or 50s. And there had been a little girl who had died. I've never gotten goosebumps so bad. All of us were creeped out. Just gave me the chills writing this out. 9. Cody, Wyoming, midnight. I had just finished a very long day at work. I am a medical courier, and I am regularly on the road, staying in hotels, and life is never dull. This particular evening I wound up on a 500 miles drive that ended in Cody, Wyoming, at around midnight. It had been cold, it was December after all, and this is Wyoming. The roads had been very so that night. They weren't clear, but they weren't treacherous. It was one of those drives in the dark where you are on edge the whole time. Staying alert for 500 miles in the dark, on roads that were nearly abandoned at this time of night, with light snow and heavy winds, takes a lot out of a person. This particular week had been very busy. I had been in 4 states that week by the time I reached Wyoming that evening. The drive to the patient's house was up a windy slick road, and the drive was uneventful. After I had dropped the medicine off to them and called the boss to let them know I had made it in and was heading to a hotel to get some sleep. Pretty usual conversation. We talked briefly about how much they would reimburse me for the hotel room. They always say $80 to $100. It's pretty typical, and fair since the cheap hotel in Cody, Wyoming is about that price. I however am 31, and a good night's rest, a good free breakfast, and a nice AM soak in a hot tub are requirements for when I catch myself in a hotel room. I know that by the time I get to the hotel I have put in serious miles, so I treat myself, 1, because if I am staying in a hotel it has been a profitable day and I can afford to treat myself just a little, and 2, I feel better after a good night's rest, a great breakfast, and a nice soak. I will not name the chain of hotels I stay at, but I frequent one chain because it's the best value hotel in my hometown, which is back in Nebraska. Tonight I pulled into the hotel, which I have stayed at 3 or 4 times now, so I am familiar with the place. I had called ahead about 8 hours before when I was leaving Denver to call and book a room and let them know they would be expecting me at midnight. I walk into the hotel with my bag, dusting off the snow that had fallen on me while I got my stuff out of the car and walked inside. It's very quiet, there's no music and the TV isn't on in the lobby. I wander to the counter, leaving a trail of wet shoe prints behind from coming in out of the snow into the lobby, my shoes squeaking as I approach the counter. When I get to the counter there is no one there. On the counter is a bowl of ice cream, with a brownie from the restaurant connected to the hotel. The local paper is open to the comics page, and the Sudoku is half filled out with a pen sitting there. Hanging on the back of the chair is a small lady's coat with fake fur fringe around the hood. On the floor next to the chair are a pair of smaller pink and black Nikes, and a black purse. I figure that she, by the assumption of the coat, shoes, and purse, is in the bathroom, so I stand at the counter quietly, waiting on her to return. I fiddle with my wallet, getting out my card to pay for it and my ID. I scroll through on my phone and hook up to the free Wi-Fi. 5 minutes go by. Then 10. At 15 minutes the phone starts ringing. I still had no idea where she was, and I had begun to get irritated. It had been a long day and I wanted to get rested before I got up and drove home in the morning. After the phone stopped ringing, and I started to get frustrated, I began to wander around the lobby, and behind the counter shouting, "Hello, is anyone here?" as loudly as possible. The area behind the counter is employee only. I venture back behind the counter where a hallway leads to the back of the house area connected to the offices, staff elevator, bathrooms, laundry, and the restaurant. I venture down the hallway shouting, "Hello," but still, no one answers. It is now 12:30 a.m. As I return to the counter and begin looking for a posted phone number for a manager, or someone of authority, the phone rings, the cordless phone still laying next to the paper she had opened. Frustrated and exhausted, I answer the phone, hoping it's someone who could tell me where the woman is who is supposed to check me in. It's not. It's another guest, who had tried calling earlier for a wake-up call in the morning. I explain to the gentleman on the phone my situation, and how I cannot help him. He states he is coming to the lobby to help me look for the girl at the counter. I had not found a number to call. 5 minutes go by and the strange older man, with odd glasses and long unkempt hair, comes into the lobby from the first-floor hallway. At this point, I had been behind the counter and had been shouting to the point I feared I may wake up other guests. I had wandered through the back area, the lobby, and the front part of the restaurant, all while shouting, and no one responded. This guy had given me the creeps, and I was exhausted but on high alert. An employee was missing, and a creepy guy who just happened to appear at the same time she is missing. Feeling nervous about this gentleman, I stay prepared for any strange behavior and keep myself at least arm's distance from him the entire time. I explain where I have looked. That I have yelled. At this point, I begin to go through what I call worst-case scenario preparation. This guy could have easily overpowered a small woman. I may be standing here with a crazy person. I keep my space, and my back towards the main entrance just in case. I am a grown man, just under 6 feet, I have had self-defense courses, and I have a CCW, concealed carry weapon, after encountering a bear at a patient's house in the fall. I have no reason to believe I am in immediate trouble, but this guy just gives me the creeps. It is at this point I debate calling the cops. It's now 12:45 a.m. The gentleman tells me, maybe she's in the bathroom, to which I respond that I had thought that myself, but I had walked by and yelled loudly when I walked through the back and no one responded. He insists we check the bathrooms. My red flag goes off and I put another foot or two of space between us as I let him lead us down the hallway to the employee bathroom. My heart and mind are racing at this point. Did this dude kill her and now he's gonna try to kill me? I start to worry about my safety as we go down a hallway that leads to small rooms with one exit in and out. We reach the bathroom. He knocks and announces himself, then opens the door. The bathroom is empty. We check a few more rooms and the elevator and find nothing. We venture back to the lobby where I stand behind the counter looking for any phone number that could be a manager or supervisor. After about 10 minutes I find a number and someone answers. It's now 12:55 a.m. The half-asleep voice on the other end of the phone is the maintenance woman for the hotel. Confused as to who I am and why I am calling, I explain the situation as the creepy man stands on the other side of the counter staring at me in a dead cold manner. The maintenance woman says she will be there in 10 minutes or so. I hang up the phone. I walk around the counter still confused, looking at her stuff there, as if she just vanished. It's at this point I decide to wander towards the lobby seating for the restaurant. Once in the doorway, I turn the corner and down to the end of the booths. There are a pair of legs hanging out of the booth. I had walked within 15 feet of there while checking around before the creepy guy showed up. I see her legs hanging and instantly the pit of my stomach turns sour and a sense of dread comes over me. Suddenly the creepy guy walks right up to me. Thinking the worst, I take a few quick steps away from him and down the row of booths in the dark restaurant. With him at the other end, I look into the booth where she is laying. She is maybe 20 and very pretty. I shake her foot, but she doesn't respond. I shake again, saying "Hey." Nothing. It's at this moment the creepy guy starts down the booth that I finally feel I may need to defend myself. I kneel to draw from my ankle holster as he quickly comes down the row of booths, and at this exact moment the girl wakes up and accidentally kicks me in the chest, knocking me gently on my ass and stopping Mr. Creepy in his tracks, also stopping me from drawing a weapon. She had been asleep. Mr. Creepy was just a guest. Moments later the maintenance woman arrived and by 1:15 a.m. I was in my room trying to decompress. TLDR. The hotel clerk wanders off late at night. She is found alive and safe, but not after I prepare myself to find her dead and almost draw a weapon on a creepy guy. 10. When I was 11, my mother and I lived with her boyfriend who I hated. He was occasionally physically abusive to me and was always intimidating. Anyway, when it got super creepy was one rainy Saturday morning. My mom was at work, so it was just me and Rick home. The phone rang at about 8 a.m. and I jumped out of bed and went to the kitchen to answer it. It was my little league coach calling to confirm that my baseball game had been rained out. I headed back toward my bedroom but had to pass Rick's bedroom to get there. As I did, there he stood, 6 feet 2 inches and buck naked. Not wanting to chat with any grown naked man, I averted my gaze and tried to shoot into my bedroom. As I tried to shut the door I felt something block it open. Rick followed me to my room and stuck his foot out to keep me from shutting the door. He stood right by me, towering over me, and asked what the call was. I told him, but he just stood there, 2 feet away, naked and glaring at me for what was probably 30 seconds but felt more like 5 minutes. He said nothing but stared angrily at me. I was already terrified of him from some violence he had committed against me before, but this was different. This felt like strange, sexual intimidation. Very scary for a young boy. Very creepy. He finally turned around and walked away. Nothing like that ever happened again, but I did later learn he had some strange sexual issues. I was left with the feeling that he was sizing me up in a very creepy and unhealthy way. It has stuck with me for almost 35 years now. 11. When I was in 3rd grade, I remember getting called to the front office to be dismissed. I always knew when I would be getting dismissed beforehand, so this caught me off guard. Maybe my mom was going to surprise me with a day off. Maybe? Anyway, I get about halfway to the office and my teacher comes up behind me screaming at the top of her lungs to get back in the classroom now. And grabbed my arm super hard, which I understand now as an adult, and dragged me back into the classroom. I thought I was in trouble. She immediately slammed the door shut behind me and locked it, then flipped the lights off. I'm so very, very confused. The classroom phone was lying on her desk instead of being hung up on the wall. She whispers into the phone that I'm officially back in the room and on lockdown. Then an announcement over the school's intercom informs the entire school that they need to be in lockdown and that all students need to run back to the classrooms. Cue silent panic. Long story short. Some random guy tried to dismiss me from school to kidnap me. We don't know who he was or anything about him. My mother was immediately called to dismiss me after being phoned about the incident. She had to show her license and walk to the classroom to physically walk with me. 3 days after this event, which happened on a Friday, we had full photo name tags for any non-student, aka an adult, who wanted to walk through the office doors. You had to give your license hashtag, scan a copy of your license, take a current pic to be printed on a temp badge, then be cleared to enter the actual building by scanning the photo ID temp badge. Makes me sick to think about it. I now have a 3-year-old daughter who I am slightly nervous about sending to school in a few years. Fortunately, school security is way more amped up than when I was in school back in the 90s. 12. When my kid was about 2.5 years old, he was a champion sleeper. Put him to bed, he was out pretty quickly and would sleep through the night until morning. One weeknight, he wakes up around 11 p.m. crying about his grandmother, his dad's mom, saying he wants to call her. I tell him we can't call her because she's sleeping, just like he should be. It took a while and I had to let him stay in my bed, but I got him back to sleep by promising we would call her at 7 a.m. when we woke up for school. My alarm goes off at 7 a.m., and he immediately gets up and asks to call Grandma. We do. Aunt answers the phone. Grandma was in a work-related accident at about 11 p.m. the night before and had only just gotten home from the hospital about an hour before, so she was sleeping. Easily the creepiest moment of my life. My kid and his grandma have some seriously deep connection I'm unable to explain. TLDR, my kid woke up in the middle of the night because he knew his grandma had been hurt on the other side of the city. 13. To start this story, it should be said I lived in a very small town before my recent move and I'm a young woman in my early 20s. This was back in September and I had just gone to get my license renewed after turning 21 the day this happened. That night, my phone was dead and I got a flat. I started walking back towards my work to get a ride phone and halfway through my maybe 4-mile walk, a big black truck went past me, and like 10 seconds later ways up the road pulled off back to the left. Immediately, I knew it was bad news bears, so I got my keys in between my fingers as a weapon. As I eventually approached the truck, I'm looking into it to my left trying to scope the situation out. Then to my right, I hear a man's voice say, "How are you tonight?" I look over and see this tall, pot-bellied, dopey-looking redneck. He was freaked up on something, my guess is pain pills because he didn't smell like alcohol and didn't have the look of a meth head. He was also naked from head to toe, with not even a sock or shoe on his foot. Oh, and he was masturbating as he walked toward me. I said I was fine, just taking a walk. I refused to give him any information. My heart was racing, my adrenaline was pumping, my fight or flight was engaged and I chose manipulation, which essentially means fighting. I was in flats, flight was out of the question. He got closer to me and I said, "Don't touch me." He said, "I'm not going to hurt you," while simultaneously grabbing my breast, stupid dopey grin still on his freaked up face, hand still jacking his dick. I punched his stomach with my key hand and he laughed. He asked me if I saw anything I liked. I said, continuing to keep my voice as firm and calm, and determined as possible, "No sir, I just want to go." His face contorted confusedly and he asked, "You want to go?" in a very angry tone. I said, "Absolutely." And he looked at me, threw his arm forward, and yelled, "Well, go then." I stepped backward and fell out of my shoe, quickly calculating how to get it without taking my eyes off him. They're little leather things and can be hard to just slip into. He then screamed, "Go." And I quickly just snatched it off the ground and started walking with it in my hand. I walked briskly and he called after me, "You got some nice titties, girl." Wanting to keep him distant and placated and without looking back, I called, "Thank you, have a good night." Implying to him, "This conversation is over, motherfreaker." He then called, "Is that pussy wet?" And in the same spirit as the last answer, I yelled back, "No sir, have a good night." Implying once again to him, "This encounter is over, motherfreaker." I then snuck a peek backward and saw his stupid naked ass walking back to his truck, stumbling over the gravel, and I quickly snatched up my other shoe off my foot rather than try to put the other one back on, and immediately ran to the first house I saw with cars. I decided the evil I didn't know was better than the one I did. I banged on the door and a man answered. I was in shambles trying to explain to this half-asleep Samaritan what had happened. He let me in and his wife came out and sat with me. I called my ex, together at the time, to explain where I was and what had happened. We called the police and they came, took my statement, and took me to work to get a ride. Nothing ever happened after that. They never found him. For a while, I was terrified I'd see him at the Taco Bell where I worked. But that was hands down the creepiest thing that ever happened to me, because A, everything I just said, and B, it took me 15 minutes to walk to where he was parked. He waited that long. But it only took him 10 seconds to see me walking alone at midnight and decide to take advantage of the situation. That's what freaked me the most about it. He just waited. Freaking predator. 14. Visited my folks' mausoleum to pay respects. Weekend. Clear weather, about 9 to 10 in the morning. It's an outdoor 1-2 stories, U-shaped, built around a courtyard. Open side to the north. Parked about 50 yards away. Glanced up as I parked and observed a male, dressed in a black suit, white shirt, I think black tie, who looked Hispanic, clean-shaven, his early to mid-30s. He walked toward a sink cutting station in the NW corner of the second floor, where my parents' niche is, then pivoted and walked back south out of my line of sight because of the layout. Probably about 10 feet on the second level was visible from where I parked. I turned to pick up my flowers from the passenger seat and then immediately exited the car. Walked the 50 yards and up the flight of stairs, and no one was there. After paying respects, I confirmed the stairs were the only way down. 15. A person has shot in the head 3 feet away from me in the spot I was standing not 5 seconds before in queue. I was skiing with a group of my friends, and I let a family take my spot in line because it would have fit the lift exactly at 10 people. We quickly swapped spots and I turned around to my friends, putting my back to the father who now stood in my spot. Then he just dropped. No loud bang or anything, just a thud as the guy hit the snow with blood splattering all over my back. I see his face every day. We found out later that there was a group of people hunting where they shouldn't have been, and that it must have been a stray bullet. 16. So I'm like the biggest skeptic in the world about paranormal stuff. My sister on the other hand isn't. She swore to me that something was haunting her or the house or something. Everything she said I made excuses for, even if I was there while they happened. Things would move from one place to another when we weren't looking, TVs and radios would turn on and off by themselves, that kind of stuff. I have countless stories of that kind of thing, some creepier than others, but again I tried to give explanations as to how they could happen. One day we were sitting in her room and all of a sudden my sister is in a visible amount of pain. This lasts for a couple of seconds, and I asked her what was wrong. She was like, I don't know, all of a sudden it just felt like my chest was on fire. She pulled down her shirt collar a little and there were 3 fresh scratches, still really red and inflamed, kind of like this, going down her neck and collarbone. I was sitting right next to her. There is no way she did it to herself, and they weren't old, so it's not like she could have done it to herself and then pulled this crazy stunt to do it later. It was very creepy and I have yet to figure out an explanation for how it could have happened. 17. When my friends and I were 10, we had a sleepover at a friend's house, all guys. We did the usual routine of playing Halo and eating pizza until about midnight, at which point we tried to sleep, after about 30 minutes of laughing at one friend who broke every silence with a massive fart. So about 20 minutes pass and everyone is completely out of it, bar me and one of my friends, let's call him Matt because that's his name. We can't get to sleep because we happen to have the least comfortable sleeping positions in the lounge. We talk for a little bit, but eventually decide to try and sleep. 10 minutes go by, and suddenly we hear an extremely loud raindrop sound effect. Not a real raindrop, but one of those exaggerated for kids' toys kind of sound effects. We ignore it, but it sporadically plays again every 3 minutes or so. No one else is awake, so I and Matt decide to investigate the playroom, adjacent to the lounge, where the sound seems to be coming from. We stand there a good 10 minutes waiting for the sound to occur so we can find where it's coming from, but no luck. We try going back to sleep and hear that now it's not only the raindrop but 10 seconds afterward it would be followed by a creepy clown giggle sound effect, as is typical for sound-based toys. Now, we start looking through the toys in the playroom. There's quite a lot as the house is owned by a childcare professional. We can't find it. We wake up the friend whose house it is, saying we're creeped out by the noises and don't know where they're coming from. He, half asleep still, mutters that it's probably nothing, and returns to sleep. We agree to go back to bed. 5 minutes later, the clown sound starts up, immediately followed by the raindrop effect. We find the sound effect keyboard toy that seems to be making the sounds, but it doesn't seem to be switched on. There weren't any toys pressing down on the buttons, and if anything it seemed oddly isolated from the other stacks of toys. Groggy from the lack of sleep and paranoid that there are paranormal forces at work, we stare at the toy for 10 minutes to see if it activates again. Nothing. We agree to put it back, go to bed and try to pass out before any more noises keep us up. Matt manages to get comfy in his sleeping bag and falls asleep quickly. I, however, was too creeped out and ended up only beginning to drift off about 15-20 minutes later. Unfortunately, at that very point, the clown sound sounded once more, louder this time. I spent the rest of the early morning sitting in the dark staring at the playroom doors. Everyone else woke up pretty well rested, and Matt wanted to pretend nothing happened. I explained the situation to the friend whose house it was, as his mom entered the room. She explained that toy couldn't have been making noise, as she had taken out the batteries, and glued the battery slot closed, a couple of weeks back when she was looking after a couple of toddlers that had a habit of finding the keyboard after she hit it, and playing the sounds all day and night. She didn't explain why she didn't look after them anymore, likely their disruptive behavior, but my paranoia led me to believe it was because the kids died and their malevolent spirits were tied to that godforsaken sound effect keyboard toy. TLDR, my friend and I kept up all night by mysterious clown giggle raindrop sound effects. Originated from an isolated and untouched sound effect toy, which only happened to play when we were about to drift off to sleep. Kept awake by louder clown laughter, spent the night staring at the playroom door in suspense. The friend's mother explained how that toy couldn't have made a noise because of batteries being removed and the battery slot being glued shut in response to disruptive 3-year-olds that had a habit of playing with the toy all night. 18. I work at an elementary school that used to be an orphanage. One time I was bending over a sink helping a very young child turn the faucet on and off, and, looking in the mirror, thought I saw a kid walk into the bathroom behind me. Turned around, but nobody was there. 19. On my 8th birthday, I had some kids from the neighborhood stay the night. We all slept in the living room so we could stay up and watch movies. I woke up in the middle of the night to a sound I can only describe as a deep pulsing sound. I sat up and looked around and saw that everyone else was still sleeping. Then I saw a huge dark shadow standing behind the living room couch. I immediately put my head under the blanket out of pure fear. I knew the pulsing sound was coming from the giant human-shaped shadow and I had the feeling it was staring directly at me. Every few minutes or so I'd poke my head out from under the blankets only to see it standing there, pulsating. I felt like it wanted to harm me. The second time I looked at it I noticed it had long hair long enough to drag on the ground. I tried telling my mom about it the next morning. She brushed it off as a nightmare, but I've known to this very day that it wasn't. I'm 28 years old now and it still freaks me out to talk about it. 20. I used to get asked, "Who were you with?" a lot when people would see me out walking. It didn't faze me at first as I just assumed they made a mistake, but then one day I asked who they saw me with. I was told by multiple people, who didn't know each other, that they saw me walking with a girl often, especially at night. One friend I was meeting early in the morning, around 3 a.m., asked me who I was just with and told me a girl was walking beside me and then turned off and said she even appeared to say bye to me. What makes it creepier is I always used to hear someone, a woman, call my name in the house and my lights would turn on around 2 to 3 am. I haven't experienced any of that in quite a few years though, so who knows. 21. My creepy thing happened about a month or two after I moved to Lima. I was taking a taxi home from a friend's house around midnight. Now, independent taxis are unregulated there, anyone can slap a taxi sign on their roof, or tape it to the inside of their windshield, as the case may be, and presto, they're a taxi. My friend lives in a pretty sketchy neighborhood, and I, having long blonde hair, am a foreigner. I get in a taxi that has checkers on the side, which is usually decently safe, and give my driver directions to my house. About 2-3 of the way there, he asks me to clarify where my house is. I do, then he abruptly turns the car at a 90-degree angle and parks it in the middle of the road, turns off the engine, and gets out. I ask him what's going on. I think he says something about the engine needing to cool, but I'm not quite fluent at that point, so I'm still not 100% sure what he said. He opens the hood of the car, takes out his phone, and starts texting someone. I had a general idea of where we were, but I wasn't sure, and I didn't like the idea of taking off down an empty street at night on my own, so I stayed with the car as well. After maybe 30 seconds, he shuts the hood of his car, puts away his phone, and I get back in because I am an idiot. We continue to my house, which is where it got weirder. It's common in Lima to just tell the taxi driver which block of the street you want to get out at, because again, any rando can be a taxi driver. Not this guy, though. He kept asking me for my exact address, even when I told him it was literally the house on the corner. I gave up arguing and told him the number of a big building a block away from my house, paid him, and pretended to walk up to that building until he had, slowly, driven away. Dunno if anything would have happened later if I'd given him my house number, but it creeped me out enough that I got my friend to pick taxis for me for the next few months.